Hi everyone. This video will be on using or adding sliders to Desmos and making your graphs move. So here we have y equals the sine of x minus 1. Now I could add an amplitude, right, 2, 3, and change the graph this way, but instead of adding a number, if I add a letter, right below a add slider pops. If I click on this, right, it will give us a range from -10 to 10, and now I can either drag it myself, right, or if I press the button right here that says play, it will move back and forth continuously. So I can play around with that to change how I want it to move. So let's say I didn't want it to start at a negative number. Let's just say I wanted it to start at 1 and go up to 5. Now when I press play, you can see it doesn't quite do the flipping to the negative side, and it moves. And then right underneath the pause, you can see these two arrows. If I click on those, right, I can now make it just go in one direction. Now it'll start over. It just goes in one direction. This one will just play it once, and then it'll stop. And this one, I've never really used this one. This one says it plays it indefinitely. So I'm not quite sure how that is different from the first one. But I guess that one doesn't put that domain restriction in there. So let's go back to, I'm going to move it in the first one. And then you can also change the speed. I guess that must have changed my domain in there. I'm going to also change the speed, right? I can make it slower. As you can see it moving very slowly now, or you can speed it up as well. So those are different ways to change the movement in there. I'm going to go back to, let me put this maybe at 1. Right? But we can add other sliders in here as well. So I'm going to try to make water moving. So besides adding the amplitude, I could also change the period in here. All right, so if I add a slider B now, this one will go in and out, kind of like an accordion. And if I even add a C, and do you remember what C does? Hopefully you said move it left or right, right? I can add a C in here, and this will move it left and right. And then it's really just playing around with how wide you think each of these ranges should be. For me, I found that I changed B to 0.2 and 1, right? So I've really limited my period in there. I've made it a much, much wider period. And then I changed my amplitude, I think, to something like 0.5. I made this pretty small as well because waves aren't going to be huge. So now, right, if I play all three of them, that still doesn't look like waves at all. And that's because I didn't change this. This is at a huge period. I'm going to go back and change that just to a 1. Now I think, let's see, it's not bad, but waves obviously don't move that fast and not back and forth. So let's change it all to the same direction, and maybe I'm going to go to each one. I am going to slow them down. So now they're going at a slower rate. I could also come in here and change my graph so that it is, there's a dotted line, and if I add the equals to, it's now a solid line. Obviously I would change this maybe to blue. And then I could also come in here and copy and paste this. And come down here and copy and paste another graph, and maybe move it down slightly and change this. If I change this to blue it'll give you, right, it's now a blue upon blue, and it'll give a darker version of there. And here you can see it moving kind of in the right direction. It does skip back a little bit, but it's really just playing around with the graphs kind of to figure out what you want. I could make a, add a third graph in there to make an even darker blue underneath, but it's kind of fun to play around with sliders and movement in your graphs.